Next, let's queer up health. Madonna's Emotional World AIDS Day concert and first days in New York living with the gay community. Madonna has been an icon in the LGBTQ+ community since the 1980s. And this week she proved what she really thinks about the gay community as she stopped her world tour concert in Amsterdam to make very personal remarks about the gay community and the importance of World AIDS Day. She repeats over and over, "Did you know that? We tribute to our community and all that has been lost to AIDS. So we remember using Madonna's emotional challenge."
To perform each evening with my children, who mean everything to me. Today is World AIDS Day. Do you know that? Is that important to anybody? Maybe it seems like it's so far away that it doesn't mean anything.
No, it doesn't.
It's just another holiday. But let me explain something to you. There is no cure for AIDS. People still die of AIDS. Did you know that?
Yes.
Just 5 people said yes. When I first came to New York, I was lucky enough to eventually meet and become friends with so many amazing artists, musicians, painters, singers, dancers. The list goes on and on, writers. And then one day people started getting sick and nobody could understand what was happening. People were just starting to lose weight. People were dropping like flies. They were going to the hospital. Nobody understood what was happening. The news started calling it the gay cancer because it was predominantly in the gay community, which was a terrible shame because I don't know if you understand this right now, but in the early 80s, it was not cool to be gay. It was not accepted to be gay. Did you know that? Yes. Or do you just take it for granted right now? No. So to be able to stand up and say, "I am a homosexual," was a very brave action. A very brave and courageous thing to say and do.
It fucking still is.
Right, but the point isn't really about that. Can you imagine what it was like in that time when being gay was considered sinful and disgusting? When suddenly the vast majority of the gay community started dropping like flies and people were dying everywhere? When I say they were dying everywhere, I'm not exaggerating. Every day I would wake up and hear a new story, a new friend. I'd be visiting someone new. I'd be sitting by their bedside watching them die. Hundreds and hundreds. Meanwhile, nobody in the medical community wanted to do anything about it because they said, well, fuck it, they're faggots. They deserve to die. Yeah, that's what they said. It was a pretty devastating, scary time. And I personally lost so many friends, so many loved ones. I would have cut off my arms if I could have found a cure for them to live. I watched so many people die, male and female, children, straight, gay, etc. Because in those days people didn't test blood in the hospital for blood transfusions. So children were also ostracized if they had HIV. I don't know if you know that. In any case, It was a devastating time, and for me, it was like a whole generation was wiped out. And I watched my very best friend, Martin, die. I was holding his hand. He was suffering so much, he could barely breathe. He wanted me to play Maria Callas. He said, play Cos la Diva. And I did. And I said, please, Martin, let go. And I watched his spirit leave his body. And I don't know if you know this, but during Live to Tell, he is the first face that appears. And then there were so many others afterwards. I'm not saying this because I want you to feel sorry for me. I want you to recognize how lucky you are right now to be alive.
That was a lot. That is so much. And it reminds us why for 40 plus years and counting, Madonna has been a fierce ally to our community. Anybody who gets in her way over the decades has gotten what's theirs. But the fact that she continued, she stood up for us when we literally couldn't stand for ourselves. She stood up for us through decades and fights and HIV in the 90s and marriage equality fights. She's been there, and she's drawn a lot of negativity around the last few years for various reasons. Some superficial, some perhaps more substantial, but nothing is more substantial than the fact that she loves us. She loves us. Yeah. She comes to us, she holds our hands, she's just a lot. And she talked about her best friend who passed away. Also, if you're old enough to have seen the Truth or Dare concert documentary that they made, one of the dancers, Gabriel Troupin, passed away of AIDS when he was only 26. And I wanted to say that. And she kept saying, did you know that? And it's almost like personal reflection. Like, oh my God, did you know that? Like, did I know that? Did I remember that? She comes in, and from my reading of her there is that she can't believe it. When she asks us, did you know that? It's not only are we keeping ourselves up on our LGBTQ history, it's that, oh my God. It's not, did you know that? It's almost like, can you believe that? Yeah. And so thank you, Madonna. Thank you so much for this speech and 40 plus years of love and friendship.
I mean, it's just, I saw all the people of the pictures of the people that passed away. And I remember like each one, like when they died, and we stand on so many shoulders. We really do. Those were the horror days. And I lived through that, and I know we all did. And I think what happened is, thank God we got the medicines that now you can have it, and it can be a chronic thing where, as long as you take your medicine, for the most part, you can live. But back then it was a death sentence for, I would say, probably 90% of the people that got it. And, this new generation that didn't see that, I think a lot of people just take it for granted. But anytime I have the opportunity to like remind people, like, listen, we had a while to get here, and we stand on so many of those people that died because they took medication. The medical community was experimenting, trying to figure out things. Those people died taking these medicines that maybe weren't the greatest and was hurting them more than helping them, and that sort of thing. I think of Ronald Eric Allen, my dear friend. He was a beautiful dancer, died at 21 years old, and he had his whole future ahead of him. At the funeral, I sat there thinking I was so old and I had lived so much life, and now all these years later, I mean, all the life that I've lived, and he missed out on it. So it's just, it's just, I don't take it for granted. I really don't. And you just saw people just dropping like flies. And it's like they'd be okay one day, and then 2 months later you'd see them and they'd have the look, because it was like this look that they would get. And it was just like, oh my God, they have it. Oh my God, they have it, And I just knew I was going to die from it. Because, see, they labeled it as the gay disease. And at that time, I was identifying as a effeminate gay male. And I just said, well, it's going to happen to me because it's happening to so many around me, It's bound to happen.
Inevitable.
I think that her timing is also very important because we've gotten to a place where there's a sense of complacency. And I was told yesterday of someone who's 30 years old that died of AIDS this week. Or last week, because he stopped taking his medication. So yes, you can live a healthy life with HIV, but what if you stop taking your pills? Then you're going to die of AIDS, and you're going to have wasting, and you're going to get CMV, and you're going to have Kaposi-sarcoma, and things that people don't even think about. I remember several years ago on the ride for Smart Ride, at the closing, I define like two different groups of people. Those who are over 30 know someone who's died of AIDS. Someone under 30 doesn't. And we did this thing like, if I say AZT, half the room thinks it's a fraternity. For those of us over 30, it was a drug that extended your life, but it wasn't a better life, nor a life necessarily worth living. When we talk about the quilt, half the room thinks of a grandma sitting on a front porch knitting, where those over 30 know that the quilt is actually the size of a standard coffin, because that was the way that you can memorialize and put it out there. And people would make these quilts, which represented their friends that were lost, a lot of which couldn't be buried in public because they had AIDS and they didn't want them in certain cemeteries and stuff. So there's a lot that has to be passed forward and it has to be taught because people have forgotten. I mean, I think as a part of our own makeup, we put up our own defenses. Seeing the pictures that we just witnessed, they take you back. My mind doesn't let me remember all that ugly, all that sadness, all those people sitting in a hospital bed with someone holding their hand and they can't even move. I think her words there are important and they're timely.
That hospital room picture was very famous. The
Yeah.
family was saying, I really do hope that as many people as possible do see this video because it's really powerful and it's meaningful and it's especially essential viewing for the gay community here in South Florida, where South Beach is now an HIV hotspot with new infection rates being more than 4 times the national average.
Florida still remains number one in the nation, and Broward and Dade counties are the two top areas within the nation where new cases of infection are.
It's so important to remember this,
Hearing Madonna say those words, did you know that? I think even for her audience members, again, if you're at a Madonna concert, you have a certain level of expendable finances to be able to buy a ticket. She is probably her most popular, group of people are white gay men, not just gay people, but probably white gay men. And this is a disease that is no longer affecting white people.
Right.
And it is the privilege of hearing people in the audience that there was not silence was actually repulsive to me, that people were, again, commenting or talking over or whatever they were doing was rather disgusting. It was embarrassing to imagine myself and disrespectful. But this is a disease that is, it is great to have meds if you can have access to them. It's great if you have access to healthcare. It's a privilege. We in this community, and it's sad that we have such high rates of infection and people contracting it when we have access, even free access to things, because there's millions of people across the world that have zero access. There isn't a clinic, there isn't an AHF, or there isn't an organization to help you get tested, treated, preventing. And I think her words are really important to remind people about the privilege that we have for healthcare.
Absolutely. And to touch on what you said, a lot of people, and Glenn, as a Smart Ride founder, you know this, that you mentioned the complacency. But there's a complacency because we're in America. There are currently about 35 million HIV/AIDS cases worldwide. 34 million, 25 million of them are in sub-Saharan Africa. So HIV/AIDS is under control, in America, but not in sub-Saharan Africa. Another 10% are in South Asia, and that's not counting China. So yes, while and it's terrible that someone didn't take their meds, and the mental health aspect of living with HIV/AIDS is a completely different story. And I'm sad that some people don't avail themselves. But the fact is, this is still a global crisis. We're talking about World AIDS Day, and we've got a handle on it. It's still painful. It's still painful here, and it's still painful to have to be able to, it's a privilege to walk with our friends who are positive, but it's also painful to watch them go through it. But the fact is, this is a global disease. It is not getting better in many places because they don't have access. And Madonna speaking up like this, and she was in Europe, she was in Amsterdam.
Amsterdam.
That helps. She's our Princess Di.
Yes, she is.
You know, Princess Di was going out there and just hugging an AIDS patient, and that was earth-shattering in the moment. And Madonna I won't say she picked up the mantle, because she was carrying it with Princess Di and Lady Diana in the 80s and early 90s as well. But she's our Princess Di.
I just got to say one last thing.
Yes.
People don't talk about you equals you. See, I think if people were more educated, because once you're on your meds and you're undetectable, you are non-transmittable. And so that needs to be blasted all over the world. And these countries need to get on board with helping their citizens that are HIV positive, because if they get on medicine, they won't spread it.
But first off, it's completely avoidable. You don't have to get HIV. And that's the thing, is it's not okay to get it and just go on living on these meds, because no one knows what's going to happen in 35 years. You don't know what it's going to do to your liver, your heart, or anything else. No one's been on those drugs that long. I've been on them for 30 years at this point, and I can tell you that they have repercussions. You know, there's other things that happen because you've been taking these meds for so long, and you do get to a point where you have I can't think of the right word right now, but you just can't take the pills.
The fatigue.
It's pill. Thank you. That's the word. It's pill fatigue. When you take 13 pills at night, you're at some point you go, I just can't swallow those. And and I can see how this guy that died, he didn't tell his partner, he didn't tell anybody. He just quietly stopped taking him, and his doctors knew that he was getting sick, but he did nothing about it. And you can't change that. But we also, to the point of, it's a worldwide global problem, but in where we're seeing the greatest number, yes, as white privileged or well-to-do middle class, we have access and we have knowledge, but we live in a state where you're not allowed to say gay, where you don't get sex education in schools. So when people are coming of age and they're out there exploring, no one has told them. So you can't always blame them for doing something stupid, because it wasn't stupid. They were not educated because our state won't allow it to be educated. And then if you're disproportionately affected because of economics, if you're Latino or Black, you're at a higher risk. If you're a trans woman, you're at an even higher risk. So these are all people and groups that are maybe thrown out from their home because they're gay and their father doesn't want a faggot, so he beats them up and then they're homeless. And how do you survive? You become a sex worker. And you've not been educated. And so by the time you're picked up by a Pride Lines or a SunServe or any of these organizations, you may already be positive, and you may not have even known. So.
If you are in South Florida, if you are coming to South Florida, we are home to the World AIDS Museum. And a few moments ago, Glenn was touching on AZT, which was like the early medication that it kept you going. And if you were able to keep going long enough, you got the next generation of meds. But at the World AIDS Museum, you couldn't even get AZT particularly easy. You had to have a special prescription pad, and your doctor had to be educated on this particular drug. And there they have a prescription pad from the mid to late 80s when AZT was coming on the scene. It's an artifact, it's a relic, but it is a way to physically touch and start to wrap your head around what it was. It's a totem. It is linked to the past, and the people at World AIDS Museum do a great job. So go there. It's not a large space. You can be in and out in an hour, but what you'll learn and what you'll be able to share is important. And I hope that going forward, we're able to have more fierce allies like Madonna, because she knows the game's not over.
Keep watching the only television news in the world from our LGBTQ+ community and stay informed on everything that is important for and about our diverse LGBTQ+ community.